Okay, so we'll get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for taking the time out in your busy schedules to listen to us talk a little bit about upgrading to Windows 11 and some of the challenges and the opportunities that await yourselves. So I guess the first thing to do is to talk through who we are, and I'll also talk about the agenda looks like at the moment. So we're going to ask firstly why Windows 11 now. What are the benefits and features? We're going to talk through some of the challenges that we've seen organisations face, and wherever they are on their migration journey. We'll talk about some of the approaches that we see work, and those migration success. And then we'll finally finish off with some questions. So a couple of housekeeping rules just to bear in mind. If you can drop your questions into the Q&A, would be much appreciated. And we'll be able to do our best to answer those either at the end or as we go along if we see it's relevant during the conversation. So I wanted to just introduce myself firstly. My name's Elton Nitschke. I'm the Digital Workplace Chief Technologist at Telefónica Tech. My role really encompasses a lot around devices and desktops, productivity and collaboration, end user experience, and all the sorts of things that go on the journey of customers from an end user perspective. I'm going to hand over to Simon to introduce himself. So Simon.
Hi, good morning all. I'm Simon Hammonds. I'm Head of Digital Workplace Solutions here at Telefónica Tech. So my role and my team's role is to support our customers on this Windows 11 journey and help architect that through and get the best user experience out of that. I'll hand over to Ben.
Thanks, Simon. Hello, everybody. I'm Ben Cook, Senior Product Specialist at Management Studio. So I'm involved in technical pre-sales and also helping customers get the best out of the product, so consultancy as well.
Now I'd normally be handing over to Nathan, but unfortunately Nathan has had a family emergency that he's had to deal with, so I'll be stepping in for Nathan. But Nathan heads up our partner called Hable. Hable look after training and adoption and change management for us at Telefónica Tech, and we'll be talking through some of the slides that Nathan has and why that's important as part of this journey. So I guess first things first is to really talk about why Windows 11 now. And Simon, why? What's the importance?
Yeah, well, I think everyone on this webinar will already know that we've got an impending date of an out of support of Windows 10, and I think that will be the driver for most people. So I've got a couple of slides here. I won't dwell on them too much, but I think the important thing is, what happens, not only why Windows 11 now, but what happens if we don't go to Windows 11. There's some obvious bullet points on that slide that I won't go into too in depth, but around the security piece, I think that's really key. I think after October, Windows 10 will drop out of support. There are paid for options from Microsoft. The extended security updates program, which is limited to 3 years, but at a rough cost of $60 per device for year one, and then it doubles every consecutive year. That's going to be a costly way to stay on Windows 10. So I think the problem we have here is we need to move quickly. That date's coming. Windows 11 is going to give a far superior experience. It's going to obviously improve the security. It's going to be up to date. It's going to have feature updates, and it's going to give that better, efficient, and productive experience, and future-proof all the IT moving forward. The general user experience will be better. Users will know that they're being invested in, and they're getting kind of the best modern experience, and that will help things like user retention and things like that. So the date's the key one, and I think everybody knows that's coming, and it's coming fast. So it's that's where we need to look at. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just make sure it's loading. Yeah. So again, Windows 11, more of the why. users are going to have a more productive experience. It's a much simpler way. The snapping of applications around, much easier to use. It's got a really good experience on the tablet. The voice integration, the dictation that I use quite a lot is just great. And of course, the automation built in, which helps users just to automate boring tasks while they can get on with the important things. Then there's around the security. There's a whole raft of security improvements. I just called a few out there, but things like the secure boot, making sure that only trusted software gets there and boot, and the enhanced security defaults, just out the box, a more secure operating system. And then we have the collaboration, things like the Teams chat, the widgets, everything built in there. It's just going to give our users that user experience. All we talk about now to customers is user experience, and Windows 11 is a big part of that. And then from an administrative point of view, the device management and the group policy, we can get near parity in that, and things like one feature release per year. We know that we've got one change per year, and that's supported for 24 to 36 months, depending on the version of Windows 11 we're using. So all in all, it's a compelling reason to not only start the planning process now, but to get to Windows 11 as soon as possible. Okay, over to you, Elton.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I thought we'd probably just touch on a little bit of the challenges that that can occur when talking about Windows 11. I had actually my boss say to me, well, why is Windows 11? Surely it's just a next. And I guess, in some circumstances, it is just a next. But there are some things that we need to consider that could prevent that from that being as an efficient as upgrade as possible. And I suppose just covering off those, look, application compatibility. There still is the case that some applications may not work with Windows 11. Now, there's all sorts of workarounds for that, and Microsoft have suggested that it's currently a 99.7% of applications that worked on Windows 10 are compatible with Windows 11. But they do have those kind of programs in place, like Microsoft App Assure program, and we've got repackaging of applications, and we can move speedily between different applications, formats, I should say, from Windows 10 to Windows 11. And so there are different ways of treating this, but we do need to first have a view of that and make sure that the applications themselves are available and working and functioning on Windows 11. And we've got a bit of a program around how that could happen. I guess the second piece is hardware requirements. Now, the big thing here is the TPM2 and the chipsets, so newer processors. There are specific hardware requirements. So if you are running older hardware, the likelihood of needing to upgrade is probably quite high. Again, being able to identify those devices with those hardware constraints means that you can put in place a plan to be able to move forward with those, particularly replacing those devices. There's another element to this, and Windows 11 particularly comes with some changes in its features and functions, and that kind of has a whole new fresh interface. So we'd want to think that you'd like to support your employees through this change. Now, again, this is very much dependent on kind of what you're actually doing, if you're doing an in-place upgrade or whether you're doing a complete change of the device. And often these Windows 11 upgrades go with other changes, for example, the way the device is provisioned using autopilot, or perhaps you're introducing some new security authentication mechanisms. All of these things need to be taken in the round when looking at training and adoption and the change that occurs for your employees when rolling out this new device. And lastly, what we see, I guess, from a high level point of view is resource constraints. I mean, IT departments are busy. They're doing the day job and as much, and to have a project such as Windows 11 come along, which needs the planning and coordination, organizations do tend to struggle with this, and it can cause disruptions to both the business and to IT, and that needs to be taken into account, be planned for, be managed. There's a lot of testing potentially that might be involved in it, all very much subject to whether you can just do that next, or whether you've got some challenges such as the application hardware and even the employee training, for example, that needs to be taken into account. And that's a strain on resources. So I guess the next question is, what's sort of the solution? And I suppose, Simon, I'm going to hand over to yourself first to introduce kind of what the first step we consider from Telefónica Tech to be to take when we're looking at the Windows 11.
Yeah, sure. I think that the key thing is understanding the estate, understanding what is out there, devices, compatibility, applications. Without that knowledge, then we can't formulate any kind of plan to move forward. So what we've done, and that's why Ben's on the call, is we've partnered with Management Studio to offer a pre-sales led free assessment, really, so we can take those first steps to understanding really the kind of magnitude of what needs to happen. And with that, what I'll do is hand over to Ben, who can talk about the assessment, which is called Engage.
Great, thank you, Simon. So what is Engage? What is this offering? Well, it's powered by the solution called Management Studio. It's the company I work for. This is our solution. I will talk to you a little bit later on about what Management Studio is and what it can do. But in terms of Engage, it's effectively a way of very rapidly getting a really kind of far-fetching deep discovery of the environment. And it's not limited to a single data source. So it's not like we're just looking into, say, Intune and pulling out that data. What we typically do with Engage is we connect to multiple data sources. There might be an inventory tool, there might be some HR data. There's definitely going to be some Entra or maybe some on-prem AD, bit of Intune, maybe even Config Manager if there's a kind of bit of Config Manager still kicking about, which a lot of organizations still do have, and it's a great data source. So we run connectors that pull data in from all of these different data sources so that we can do this deep discovery. And the sorts of things it enables us to do is look at active users, look at geographical spread of them, look at devices, active devices, which devices are inactive, OS versions, look at software, look at things like we've got some AI-powered auto rationalization for applications. So whilst Engage isn't going to rationalize all your apps, it will give you a snapshot of what you could achieve were you to use the auto rationalization in our product. Quite often organizations have a vast number of apps, lots of different versions. So to be able to collapse those down with some AI assistance is really, really powerful. So the idea behind Engage really is that it does this discovery, we collect all this data, and then we're able to present it back to you to have an interactive session to run through all that data. The big benefits are, well, obviously the discovery is huge, but it's also a zero installation requirement. So there's no infrastructure you have to stand up, no virtual machines, there's no bedding in time because we're not pushing an agent out there. It's just very, very fast. Typically, we can get this thing up and running in a day, sometimes less, and give you those results very quickly. So that's a little bit about what Engage is. Elton, would you move on to the next slide, please?
No problem.
So how does this work? Well, the first thing is, now it does depend slightly on your data sources. We may be able to run the connection pack on any device, as long as it's internet connected, or we may need a device that's connected with the infrastructure if there is some on-prem data that the connectors are going to be pulling in. So that's going to be deployed. It's effectively running a file, running an executable file. There's a bit of configuration that happens on the back end to tell it which data sources we're using. That connection pack pulls in that data and anonymizes it and pushes it into a cloud instance of Management Studio So the anonymization is all about not putting things like usernames into the cloud or putting device names, that kind of information that could be quite sensitive. But it will give you things like application names. So it enables you to understand, how many people have a certain application and which devices they're using without exposing the sensitive data. Yeah, Alton, if you could do the click, thank you very much. So then we have this assessment where we, with Telefonica, look at what's been found and assess those findings, and then we'll present them back to you so that you can get a full view of that discovery, the results of that discovery. Okay. Next slide, please, Alton. So yeah, benefits. One of the things we see on almost every engagement is the scope that's discussed on that initial meeting is completely different from the real scope we find once we've used Management Studio, either the full product or the Engage. It's kind of the same outcome in terms of discovery. So this really does give you a true kind of handle on the project scope, and it really allows you to plan much more effectively for Windows 11. As Elton said earlier on, there are lots of challenges with moving to Windows 11. But one of the big ones, and Elton did touch on this, is resourcing. It's understanding what resource you need to be able to deliver this change. And having this discovery really allows you to plan well and really understand what resource you're going to need. I mentioned earlier on, it's very quick because we don't need infrastructure, we don't need an installation. It's all done. Well, the kind of the configuration is done on the back end in the cloud, and then it's just a case of running that deployment, the connection pack, and zero cost. It's free, so there's no cost associated with running the Engage assessment. And I'm going to pass back to, I think is it you, Elton, now?
That's it. Yep. So I'm just going to cover off Habel's training and adoption and change and the components that are involved in this. Now, at this point in time, at the initial kind of assessment, what Habel will be looking to do is to understand, I guess, your training requirements and what that involves. And we firmly believe that as an organisation of Telefónica Tech, and the reason why we engage with Habel is because we're inspired and believe what Habel believe, which is really about getting those skills out to your people. Loads and loads of investment goes into buying the hardware, doing the deployment, people on the ground, handing out devices, etc. But often what's sometimes missed is actually getting those people to use the tools, getting them to be able to understand what the change is, and accelerate their productivity and efficiency. And that's why we want Habel to be involved in our projects, because really they do put the people at the heart of the digital innovation. We're technologists by nature, and Habel bring that kind of people element to us. We're bringing that change and understanding that change to people who may not be aware of that. So, and I guess this is really a really good graph that I liked, particularly because what it shows is that kind of return on the investment of the way you can see the value increase over time as people become much more aware of the technology. If the technology is just deployed but not used, either appropriately or proficiently, people tend not to adopt it, and therefore their efficiency doesn't improve, their productivity doesn't improve, and also they can get quite frustrated with the technology, and so that usually leads to almost like a poor user experience. But if we put in the appropriate adoption, training, and communication methods to make people aware of the change that's coming to them, and able to leverage that change, we believe that becomes a much better return on the organisation's investment in this, sometimes quite expensive technologies. So introducing Habel at this stage, at that sort of assessment stage, is just really an introduction into understanding your organisation's requirements for adoption, change management, and they have a whole bunch of different solutions to walk through. But it's probably one of the first things that they would like to look at is whether the device is a new device, or it's a refresh device. So that sort of kind of upgraded device thing, because that makes a big difference in that. Now, typically what happens, as we know in organizations, you'll probably get a bit of a combination of both. But being able to identify that early on helps align the appropriate training methodologies that go with it. Because if you've got a similar device to, or same device that you've had in the past, you're really looking at the operating system change. But if you are looking at either refreshing the device completely with a new piece of hardware, there are some changes that need to be taken into account for that. How to use it. It might come with a pen. It might come with new ways of interface, new different interfaces to the device. But also, as I mentioned earlier, typically a lot of these projects also roll out new technologies. It's not just related to Windows 11. It might be a new version of the Office. You might be moving to Office 365. You might be rolling out a new application. As Ben mentioned, you might be consolidating some applications into a single one that does exactly the same thing. So that all adds to the understanding of where you need to be in this training and adoption and communicating that to your employees. So really, you know, what we're trying to do there is to give some advice and advise you at this early stage how organisations should prepare for a change and you know, really limit the friction on that day of migration, making sure organisation is ready, so the appropriate communications have gone out, using the I guess the rollout as a transition to learning. You know, ultimately where we want organisations to be is their end users to really take on and adopt the technology. And if they've learned about that technology beforehand, then that transition becomes much more easier. And as I mentioned, understanding exactly what the devices your people actually need, understanding what the change might look like, so that we can put, you know, Hable and ourselves can put the appropriate comms and training methodologies in place to ensure that you're in a position for success. So Simon, if you wanted to wrap up on this first stage and what that looks like.
Sure, yeah. So obviously we've done this engagement with your organisation. We're then going to feed back a report that's going to include the findings of the Engage assessment, the anonymised findings. It's going to give us an idea of what the scale of change is needed, really. In with that, from the discussions that Elton's talked about, which Hable would have with the organisation, would be the ACM approach. So we're going to get a high level approach from there, and then we're going to wrap that together with some recommendations of what the next steps are, and at that point we can give a high level view of the kind of task ahead, where to start, and really, you know, hand that over to you guys and present it back just to say, here's what we found, you know, where do you want to go as the next step, and we will obviously highlight our recommendations on that. So on to the next slide, Elton.
No worries.
I think, yeah, so at that point, we are going to really start to, following on from that kind of report that's gone back to you, we're really going to start to dig deeper. And the first step of that would be a full deployment of Management Studio into your organization. This is where we really need to get some in-depth information to move forward. You know, you've already had the Engage and the pre-sales report, so now we can really step it up and start to get some real information back. And on that, I'll pass it back to Ben.
Thanks, Simon. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking you through a typical Management Studio process and hopefully give you a bit of a flavour of what it is our solution does. Before I run through this, just the high level view, we quite often describe it as, looking at my slide here, workflow, automation and user engagement for enterprise IT. Sometimes it's called an orchestration tool. The idea behind it really is that, as I said before, we have all these different data sources. So we have a really good view of the estate, and then we have orchestration, automation, reporting, and workflow within the solution to drive typical transformation processes like the Windows 11 one. So I've got these 8 steps in here of a typical process. The first process is the assessment. I've already talked about the engage assessment, and that's exactly what step 1 is. It's about using those data sources to pull in that data set. The second piece is quite often with Windows 11, if not always, there is going to need to be a bit of an understanding around applications. Quite often there are a lot of applications discovered, so I'd say for a typical, say, 2,000-3,000 seat organization, we're going to be finding at least 1,000 different applications out there. That does include different versions of the same application. But generally, one of the first challenges is understanding what to do with that list of applications. The Solution Management Studio has automation around normalizing the naming, so it makes all of the naming consistent, because vendors are pretty bad at being consistent when it comes to naming their products. So we clean all of that up. And then we've got some recommendations around what you should do with those. So this is crowdsourced, and by crowd I mean existing customer sourced suggestions with a bit of AI thrown in there for good measure, which is going to help you understand which applications you should be taking as in scope and which ones you should be rejecting, and also some rationalization decisions, so suggesting exactly what to do with all of those applications and saving a huge amount of time on that. I, for my sins, used to be an application packager, so I'll be doing a lot of this kind of app stuff at the beginning of a project manually. It's slow and it's painful, and it requires somebody who has kind of a bit of experience with that. And with this, we call it ACE. With ACE powering your app rationalization, it does certainly take a lot of the pain away and reduces the time requirements. Next up is 3 optimize. Because we've got a really good understanding of the estate, we know who is using which applications, we know departmental breakdown, we know location breakdown. If the project team's then able to say, right, our first target, we want to get some early adopters rolled out with Windows 11 in a certain location or a certain department, or some VIPs need some new Surface devices, we can optimize the effort to get that delivery possible. So we've got some really clever reporting around, it's called a projection report, which is basically minimal effort for maximum output. Really powerful. The fourth piece, and actually communication, the fourth piece happens throughout the program. It's about engaging with end users. So at that point in time, it might be sending a welcome to the project or welcome early adopters type email to that group of people. But the communications is going to be happening throughout, and it's not limited to just surveys. We have, not limited to emails. We have surveys as well. So you might send out some sort of validation survey early on in the project just to make sure that the data we've been collecting is correct. Are there any applications missing from the list that we think you need? Is your location right, and are you still working in that department? And allowing users to feed back in via those surveys directly into Management Studio so that we've got a really good data set.
Sorry to interject, Ben. There, just quickly, I found one of the features of Windows 11 of the Management Studio. It was actually in that validation piece, is asking end users, do they need that application? Is it something you need in order to roll out? Would you like us to roll out if you didn't have that application? So it can help speed up that, and I've seen examples of where you've done that in the past, where by asking those simple questions, which sometimes you just don't think to work on. Rationalization isn't just about the applications that you're doing, but also rationalizing where they're actually being deployed, and speeding that up. And I think that's a fantastic part of the tooling that you have there, and the solutions that you have there, I should say, to help with that.
Yeah, thanks, Alton. It's a good point. And something else we see customers doing quite a bit is, depending on the data source, they can do a comparison in Management Studio of the number of people who are entitled to have an app versus the number of people who actively use the app. And quite often the number of users of the app is less than the people who have a license, and so we can do some nice license true up and save a bit of money there. Next step is readiness. So this is like a real-time readiness view of, it can be really anything, whether it's a user or a device or even a certain area in the organization. We can tell you in real time who's ready to go. For those kind of early adopter rollouts, it's really, really powerful. We can even do things like you can tell us a user persona. So based on a set of, say, I don't know, 5, 10 people in a team, we can build a persona from them. And we can say, right, if we were to get those people ready, who else in the organization would be ready? So there's some really kind of nice ways of getting some good early opportunities in terms of deployments. And we can also drive automation. I haven't talked much about the automation. So what a lot of customers are doing with the solution these days is when a certain set of people are ready, perform a certain action. So maybe we move them into a certain workflow step. We send them a certain email, which is maybe offering them to choose a booking slot. So when would they like to be upgraded or receive their new device, or whatever's going to be happening as part of this transformation. And then they get booked into that time slot, and then we can start to drive the migration at that point in time, again, through automation. So super powerful automation, and that's kind of scattered throughout this process. The step 6 is about planning. So that's about understanding when you'd like to target certain people, certain devices to be migrated. So this might be, you've done your early adopters, and now you kind of start pushing out the standard rollout, if you like, the standard migrations. So we can build things called deployment units, which is our way of planning for deployments and grouping people, so that, in April we're going to start migrating the finance people, in May we're going to move on to IT, or whatever it is. So it allows you to build plans and understand when things are going to be happening. And we can drive the communications, the email communications off the back of that. So, 2 weeks before IT are due to start, send them the email to ask them to do whatever they need to do. In terms of the deployments, now, what a lot of our customers are doing these days is using our web portal to build an engineer's migration portal. So they'll have a number of engineers responsible for doing these, handing out these new devices or doing the in-place upgrades. It might be even somebody from Hable who's going to be doing some of this stuff. And what we can do is we can kind of drive those migrations from this migration portal. So the engineer says, right, so-and-so's turned up, they're ready to be migrated. They review the data in the portal to make sure that that user is really, truly good to go. Maybe they register what machine they brought back in, if it's a swap out, and then they can click a button to then migrate that person, which quite often involves adding them to some new groups or doing something with their device to maybe add it to a certain group to get certain policies, certain applications, that kind of thing. So the automation that we drive is all kind of triggered from that migration portal, or it could just be based on time. We know that Simon's being migrated at midday, so at midday, take his account, take his device, and do something with it. So very powerful in terms of hands-off migrations. And then number 8 is really post Windows 11. It's where we're into that kind of business as usual mode. We're going to be maintaining that build, pushing out that feature update, and we can start to drive those changes using all the data that we've collected and using all the automation that we've built up over the migration itself. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of what the solution is capable of and all the different processes that you might be using. And next slide, please, Alton. So we've done a lot of transformation programs with Management Studio, and these are the typical benefits we see. So the efficiency is huge, or the efficiency gains are huge, I should say. Quite often people try and do or manage these types of transformations with spreadsheets. Quite often they have lots of different data sources, lots of different spreadsheets, and it very quickly becomes messy. By having a single data source, we have a massive increase in efficiency. And the speed at which we can deploy goes up, partly because we're optimizing what to do and when and making as many people as possible ready early on. But also we've got the workflow to track when things are happening. We've got the automation to drive some of those changes. So it really does make things a lot quicker. Now, Hable are very, very good at improving user satisfaction, and the combination of Hable and Management Studio is very powerful. We can really get things working at a very good level in terms of user satisfaction. And we can provide things like surveys, so collecting data on how well the migration went, satisfaction type surveys. So we can even add things like that post-migration. But overall, the productivity goes up when you use a solution like Management Studio. You've got all of those people working from that single set of data, using automation, using the comms to drive that migration. Good. All right, Simon, I think back to you now.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think those benefits of Management Studio really resonate. Really now just about how we would go about this kind of project. So building on the kind of foundations that Management Studio have put in there, all the data we have, we now know how to move forward. So we're going to create a plan, and from that plan, historically that would have been a set plan. This department, these users, these users, these users. But I think using Management Studio, as Elton and Ben have articulated really well, is the fact that the plan can be dynamic based on readiness of apps and users, and using the portal. It no longer needs to be a fixed rollout. Using the portal, users can book their own slot to kind of get that device and that upgrade, whatever that might be. But I think, as Telefonica, with our kind of Microsoft partnerships, we've got potential funding available for proof of concepts to get people going. And I think it's important to say that, we've talked about an in-place upgrade or a new device. I think there's other options that we can build into this kind of deployment around cloud PCs and readiness. Microsoft have the option of, if you go down some Windows 365 option, for instance, then the Windows 10 device will continue to be supported in kiosk mode. So essentially, turning that into a supported device for the foreseeable as well. So there's options to move us forward to get to that date, or if we're not going to hit that date, then ways around that. There's options around, other cloud PCs with AVD and all things we can throw in as a way forward. We can't just look at this as a device and a Windows upgrade. There may be other strategic ways we can move forward with your organization, and that's all around profiling the users, their use case, their current device, their applications, and everything around that. Hardware procurement, cloud PC, I've covered that. Obviously, we've talked about apps. Apps are the make or break. I think one of the make or breaks of these kind of transformation projects, that they need to be fully tested and transitioned or whatever need, but they need full due diligence before we can move into pilot phase to make sure that the user's persona is ready with all the apps. And again, if some of the apps they had previously aren't ready, they've got the option through Management Studio to move forward anyway, and say, actually, I know that app was on my last device. I don't really use it, so I'm going to book my new device. I want it. I'm excited to get this new device. So they can do that as well. So, we're in that position. Obviously, we go through a standard design and build. That might be, autopilot, Intune, or all that kind of work, the testing, the pilot, and then we're going to move into that deployment phase. And again, can be really dynamic, as I've already said. And as that's happening, that might be over a period of time, depending on the user count. And then, of course, we're going to support that process all the way through into early life, and then potentially into, operating system support, application lifecycle management, and things like that moving forward. So we've got that kind of built out plan. It is dynamic, but we've then got those options moving forward to support the device, the operating system applications in our managed services as well. Okay, Elton?
Brilliant. I should say on that one as well, the applications is always a bit of not a showstopper, but always a bit of a curveball thrown at these sorts of moves. And some of the technology out there that we have available does help speed up that. A typical project like this might be moving from SCCM to Intune, for example. being able to take that SCCM applications and refactor them ready for Intune, test them on a Windows 11 environment, and anything that's successful is automatic, and then anything that sort of fails can be thrown up as a failure. So there's some really good, interesting ways about moving this at speed, and obviously with that date coming, it does help. But I suppose the other thing that we need to cover off here is and I'm speaking on behalf of Hable again, is looking at those digital skills. And probably one of the first things that Hable would recommend is actually looking at how mature are you in those digital skills, how mature is your organisation, and they do talk about making sure that you can get that sort of assessment done in terms of your digital skills. And this is organisationally wide, but it does sort of from a technical perspective, we've talked to Management Studio, but from a user perspective, we need to take that assessment from your users, and looking at how users currently work, how they work in the current environment, what tools do they use, what activities and networking do they use, etc. What device do they use? Are they satisfied? What's the importance of the functionality? And it's particularly important when it's linked to that kind of device refresh. We then need to look at, from Hable's perspective, look at the digital skills. There's different themes that they use, but they look at the different maturity levels that you use across those themes, and then they kind of crunch the numbers with some tooling, and give you that assessment in terms of that maturity level. And basically that leads to a change program that is tailored to your organization, making sure that they understand that they're addressing the areas of most need within your organization to deliver the right change. So bringing it into Windows 11, and the key bit here is looking at they sort of approach Windows 11 with a three-phased approach. And the first phase is about preparing users and raising awareness of change. So what is it? What are the benefits? What are the practicalities involved? And what needs to happen? I guess the second phase centers on those skill developments. What do you need to know about? What are the features that will be most effective in whatever technology you're rolling out, in this case particularly Windows 11. And finally, the third phase really emphasizes the ongoing support. You might have questions that crop up. Users generally do. It's not always technical capabilities in terms of I've got this problem, I need it fixed. It's actually, well, how do I do this, or how do I go about getting this piece of information? I used to go this way, but things have changed for me, and that really creates a sense of confidence and proficiency in the new operating system and in particular the device. The other thing to be conscious about when we're rolling out this is the comms, and Ben touched on this before. Management Studio is really, really good in delivering comms to the end users. They are the kind of the glue that helps all the change that's going on from a technical perspective be enabled for the end users. But part of that is obviously the comms, and we talked about the fact that we could say, well, do you want all those applications? But the comms has to be written in a way that really creates that kind of positive experience. Typically, as technologists, we're very matter of fact. Like, do you need this application? Yes, no. And what Hable brings to the fore is really getting that kind of positive experience. Sort of wording things a little bit differently, and creating that the way of that really resonates with your end users, and putting that all into a communications campaign. And it may be a series of emails, or it could be all sorts of different ways of communicating. But the idea is really to tell people everything they need to know about either the device or the application, and building a sense of positivity around that change. I've often spoken when I've been in this doing these sort of rollouts for a long time. Perception is a lot of your project. You may deliver the project really well from a technical perspective, but if the users haven't perceived that project to go well, you tend to get a lot of negative feedback. And it's all about perception and making things positive. People generally don't like change. So creating almost a campaign around making a positive experience, why it's going to happen, what are the benefits for the end users to embrace this change, certainly changes the mood and the mood tones between a project that could become perceived as quite negative to something that's been quite positive. And on that note, this is this is where Hable come to the fore. They really want people to understand and learn about what Windows 11 is about. They've got loads of kind of different collateral that can be put out to customers. And they use these kind of different forums to be able to do, whether that's videos, whether that's brochures, whether that's things on a portal. They can deliver the comms in an effective way, and as we said, through emails as well. So that kind of brings us to the conclusion. I don't know whether there's anything to add in here, but we've got a couple of articles that I've got links for, and you'll get the details here. But there's a couple of blogs and things that you can link to, showing up on the screen now. So hopefully you can see that we've done some of the summaries that we've talked about here around benefits, considerations, and overcoming them to Windows 11. Being able to undertake that assessment that's provided by us and Management Studio and Hable to really put you in a really good position to deliver a successful Windows upgrade. So I'm going to go on to the closing slide, and I don't know whether anyone's put in chats or questions in. I haven't seen anything come through. If you do have any questions, please drop them in now. Otherwise, we'll give it a few minutes and wrap up. No questions? Okay. I haven't seen anything come through, so thank you guys very much. Thank you for your time, much appreciated, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.